doing day in, day out when we're not off the farm, trying to help the organic community try to create a little bit of sanity within our society and within agriculture. My wife Megan and I, we've got 4 kids. Peter's our oldest. He's going to college in the state of Maine. We both grew up in the Rachel Carson era, and there's a connection there. Rachel Carson spent a lot of time in Maine, and her writing of Silent Spring, published in 1962, 50 years ago last year, a lot of that writing was done in the state of Maine. The essence that I got when I read her book when I was in high school in the early 1970s is something that has stayed with us. You know, it's one of the philosophies behind our desire to farm ecologically, and that's that everything is connected to everything else. You can't do one thing over here without it affecting something over there. And that's really the basis of organic farming, the idea that there's a connectedness and that what we do really has an important balance and effect. And it is in contradistinction to chemical agriculture, which claims this fallacy that they can spray something over here, it will accomplish the intended good, and that no other effect will follow. And that's a great load of fiction right there. So not only is that, you know, how we have ourselves determined our philosophy, but that's how we've raised our children. Our idea is that we have a connection, we have a responsibility, and that responsibility goes beyond the farm, because we all have a responsibility as citizens in a democracy to try to make things better, to try to make the system work, to bring about change. I think a lot of us see that the country that we're in today is dysfunctional to a very high degree. A lot of the power has shifted to corporations that have put greed and profit ahead of the interest of the American people, and it's up to us to stand up and say that we're the 99%. This country belongs to us, and we're not willing to let you take and abuse that and subject us to things that are bad for this country and bad for the world. That's important. I want to talk for a minute about the decade of the 1980s. I think that was a pivotal decade, and unfortunately not for the good. It was about 30 years ago that the U.S. Supreme Court, for the first time in history, allowed the patenting of life forms. It was a bacteria that a company had come up with in order to help break down oil spills. And for the first time ever, the Supreme Court ruled that the patenting of life forms was allowed. And I think that was a monstrous decision. I think the last 30 years of history has proven what a disaster came from that, and that ultimately that does need to be reversed. It is no coincidence that also in the 1980s became genetically engineered crops. They, of course, immediately became patented. And as we went along, what we came to understand was that, these patents are basically government-granted monopolies, and in this case on life forms. They didn't get the permission from the people. And the reality is this: agriculture has been practiced by your ancestors and my ancestors for 10,000 years. It was our ancestors who took the wild grasses and through selection and breeding turned crops like corn and wheat, which feed the world today. They transformed them from wild grasses into crops that the 7 billion people on this planet live. We created, as the commons, the value of those food crops that sustain humanity. And for a company like Monsanto to come along and do one minor tweak and then to be granted this patent monopoly on seed without ever having paid back the people for the 99.9% of the development, that's really biopiracy. It's taking from the commons and we didn't get paid for it, and that's not right.
Yeah.
I want to talk about seed. A couple of points I want to make about seed. This is my life, so this is something I think about every day. Seed is the foundation of agriculture. And when it comes to GMO seed, genetically modified organisms, also known as genetically engineered or GE seed or transgenic seed, they're for all intents and purposes interchangeable. The fact is, despite what Monsanto will tell you, they didn't invent GMO crops in order to save the world or to eliminate hunger or to cut down on pesticides. GMO crops are all about control. It's about taking the heritage of seed control from the farmers who for the first 9,875 years out of the last 10,000 years, they were the curators and developers of seed. The modern seed industry began about 125 years ago, and GMO crops simply are another step in the progression of taking the right and the ownership away from the people and giving it to an elite corporate class that has profit and greed really as their motivating factors. And it's not right, and it's time for us to stand together and to resist that. It's necessary for the survival of humanity. Now, here's something you may not know about patents. Every year, approximately 500,000 patents are sent into the U.S. Patent Office. Out of that, approximately 200,000 patents are granted. That means every Tuesday, on average, 4,500 patents, or 4,500 more reasons that we as Americans are restricted in our behavior, are passed by the U.S. Patent Office. When the U.S. Patent Office permits a patent, they're making money on it. There's an unholy profit motivation for them to make patents and to issue them to the corporations. Here's another interesting fact. Every year there's a challenge of something like 2,000 to 4,000 patents. And when those patents are challenged, 50% of the patents are found invalid. Let me run that by you again. 500,000 patents applied for, 200,000 patents granted every year, and when patents are challenged, 50% of patents are found invalid. Now, how is that for a system? And who is filing those patents? They're the biggest corporations that want to take control. Another aspect of patent law is that patent law in the United States is absolute. If a researcher wants to do research on a patented seed, they have to get permission from the patent holder. They're not allowed to do research. They have to sign a licensing agreement allowing the research. Many of these research licensing agreements require review by the patent owner and a decision as to whether they'll allow the research to be released. This is a despicable situation that infringes upon academic integrity, and it calls into question the entire basis of free and open discussion, and that's got to be changed. So the fact is, with patent rights being absolute, the only way that another person can possess patented technology is to sign a licensing agreement. And this is important, an important concept to keep in mind. You have no right to have patented technology unless you have signed a patent agreement and paid royalty to the patent owner. So I want to tell you about our lawsuit and about the organization that I'm involved with, and it's called Organic Seed Growers and Trade Association. Its acronym is OSGATA, and the lawsuit which we filed 2 years ago in Southern District Federal Court in New York State is called OSGATA et al. V. Monsanto. And as Zach explained to you, it's a very large plaintiff group. We actually filed an amplified complaint a few months after the original filing in March of 2011. And we have a total of 83 plaintiffs within the group. And as Zach said, that totals about 300,000 individuals within this plaintiff group. It's a very large plaintiff group. One of the things that we have in common among us is none of us are customers of Monsanto. None of us have signed a licensing agreement. We have no right to possess their technology, and that's the situation we find ourselves in today. OSGATA helped to organize this lawsuit and gathered the plaintiffs together, and then we became the lead plaintiff. And my role is I'm president of OSGATA. I helped to found OSGATA 6 years ago, and our mission is to try to develop and to promote and to protect the organic seed trade. And again, that gets back to this idea that seed is the foundation of agriculture, and that means that organic seed is the foundation of the entire organic community. Seed is absolutely essential. Free ownership by family farmers within the organic community is what we need for the organic community to be strong, to be independent, and to survive into the future. And we are being challenged in that to an extent unheard of in modern history. Now, there's 3 things that I'd like you to know about this lawsuit. One is that we're not asking for 1 cent from Monsanto. We are challenging the validity of GMO patents because we believe that the U.S. Patent Office erred when they issued these patents to Monsanto. Our lawyers from the Public Patent Foundation, the lead lawyer is Dan Ravisher, who's the founder of PubPat and the executive director. Our legal team, providing pro bono services for the family farmers, have developed 4 legal arguments based on patent law, and we are convinced that it is a strong case and that this is why Monsanto is putting out every effort they can to prevent our case from ever getting to trial. So far, we've been caught up in pre-trial delaying actions, which have been very effective historically for Monsanto. They delay long enough and the opposition tends to run out of funds. But we understand how important this lawsuit is, and we're here for the long haul, and we're not going away. Because here are the facts. We're not customers of Monsanto. We don't want their seed. We don't want their technology. We don't want their trespass onto our farms. We don't want their contamination of our crops. We want them to behave as good neighbors and to keep their transgenic pollution on their side of the fence. We don't think that we should have to risk our farms by going to court to defend ourselves from a frivolous lawsuit that claims that we're in possession of their patented technology when we want nothing to do and we're simply innocent victims. It's not fair, it's not American, and we're not going to stand for it. We believe that we have a right to farm the way that we want on our farms. This is not rocket science. This is a basic American right. We want to farm as organic farmers. Monsanto doesn't have a right to come across the fence and contaminate us. If our rights to farm the way that we want are not upheld, then your right for an access and to have choice in the marketplace for some kind of an alternative besides a future of GE food, that right is going to be extinguished. If we can't be protected in growing good seed and good food crops for you, you've lost your access to an alternative to GE food, and that's not right. So, we filed our case in the spring of 2011. Monsanto filed a motion to dismiss in mid-July 2011. Before we got that motion to dismiss, of course, there was an exchange of legal briefs, and our lawyers asked Monsanto for a binding legal covenant guaranteeing that they would not sue the plaintiff farmers in our plaintiff group should we at some point become contaminated. Monsanto referred to their website where they have what they call their commitment to farmers, a commitment which is anonymous, posted on a website. Even if we were to believe Monsanto, which we don't, what would prevent Monsanto from changing the statement on their website tomorrow? And where would we be? But the commitment, the so-called commitment to farmers, says we won't go after farmers who have trace amounts of our technology obtained through inadvertent means. Well, what do trace amounts mean and what do inadvertent means? What does that mean? We've tried to get Monsanto to define that in written briefs, and they have refused to do so. So they filed their motion to dismiss in mid-July. In a case completely unrelated to this, in the Eastern District of Missouri, St. Louis, where Monsanto was headquartered, they bring a family farmer to trial. And this is something that you should know. Since genetically engineered crops were introduced to the marketplace in the mid-1990s, on 144 occasions they have brought family farmers to court charging them with patent infringement. On another 700 cases they have settled with family farmers out of court after alleging patent infringement. There's an unknown number of threatening letters that have been received by farmers, probably in the thousands, if not tens of thousands, alleging misuse of their patented technology. We feel that there is a campaign of intimidation against American farmers, and we're not going to lay on our behinds and do nothing. We're going to stand up because this is America, and we have rights to expect freedom and justice within this country. So this farmer in Eastern District of Missouri, he and his lawyers go to Monsanto and say, you shouldn't be suing me. After all, look at this commitment on your website. It says you're not going to go after farmers like me that have trace amounts through inadvertent means. Monsanto's own lawyers described their commitment as vague. On August 11th, our legal team filed a very powerful rebuttal to the motion to dismiss. One of the things that we included in that filing was this duplicity of Monsanto, that in our case, they said that this commitment should be satisfactory for us and that we should be happy with that and not be worried that Monsanto will come after us. On the other hand, they tell this other farmer that it's a vague statement and has no meaning. So we put that into our brief. There's an exchange of briefs. Eventually, on January 31st, 2012, we have an oral argument in New York City. That oral argument was held before federal judge Naomi Buchwald. Outside, at the same time this went on, was a citizens' assembly in which hundreds of people showed up to offer support for the farmers that were in the courtroom. The courtroom was standing room only. We had 56 plaintiff farmers from 30 states in attendance wanting to let this judge know that this was not simply an academic concern, but it was a fact that all of our livelihoods are at stake on this. So the oral argument came and went. 3.5 weeks later, the judge issued her ruling, and it was in favor of Monsanto, ruling that the case be dismissed because the farmers did not have standing. You can imagine, we've all read the ruling, and in fact, any of the things that I'm referring to are posted on the website. There are 3 good websites. One is OSGATA.org, another is pubpat.org, and then our individual farm has a website, woodprairie.com. And on all of these websites, we have all of these documents, so you can read everything that I'm telling you and verify it for yourself. But imagine our surprise when Judge Buchwald made reference to Monsanto's commitment. And she said that the farmers in our plaintiff group should find comfort in the commitment from Monsanto that they would not sue us. It made some of us wonder, had the judge even bothered to read our brief? So, citing different factual errors and legal errors, we filed a notice of appeal and then finally an appeal of dismissal. There's been an exchange of briefs over the last 8 or 10 months, and this year on January 10th we had an oral argument before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit in Washington, D.C., 3-judge panel. Outside, nearby Lafayette Park, which is within sight of the White House, there was another citizens' assembly with citizens standing up and supporting the family farmers that really are on the front lines in trying to fight this abuse by one of the foremost patent bullies in the world, Monsanto. We're now awaiting a ruling. That oral argument was going on 2 months ago. The ruling could come at any time. It typically comes 2 to 4 months after the oral argument, so could be now, could be a couple of months from now. The two possibilities are, one, a majority of justices, meaning at least 2 out of the 3, rule in our favor to overturn the dismissal and send this case back to Judge Buchwald in Manhattan. The other possibility is that the Court of Appeals will uphold the dismissal. In that case, we do have the right to file an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. So obviously we're hoping that justice will be served. The farmers in this plaintiff group do not feel that we have received justice yet. It is remarkable how far the tentacles of Monsanto go within the U.S. government. Campaign contributions to both Democrats and Republicans. They are one of the most politically connected corporations in the United States. It's an open question as to whether we're going to see justice or not. But the need is there. The need to reclaim the ownership of seed, that's there. Here's an interesting thing. I'm not sure if you know this, but when Monsanto takes one of their transgenic inventions to the Food and Drug Administration, they say, well, this invention that we have is substantially equivalent to traditional crops, and for that reason, you shouldn't require us to label this crop. Then they take the very same invention and they go to the U.S. Patent Office and they say, this invention we have here is new and it's great and it's deserving of a patent. And the U.S. Patent Office grants them a patent. Well, which is it? Is it new and deserving of a patent in which it ought to be labeled because it's different? Or is it substantially equivalent and in that way unqualified for a patent? They can't have it both ways, but in the dysfunctional government that we have, they do get it both ways. And that's not right, and that's something that we need to change. I understand that later this evening there's going to be the awarding to some good folks here from Oregon of the David Brower Award. And there's a little story that I'd like to tell. I guess it's an illustration that I think that all of us have a role to play. It doesn't matter where we are, what our station in life is, but we all have a role to play. There's a need for change in this society. If you extrapolate out the direction that we're heading in, and if you've got children, there's a lot of cause for concern. David Brower was somebody who really stood up for what he believed in and was a tremendous influence within the environmental community. And I've always felt that the environmental community and the organic farming community is a wedding made in heaven. and we ought to be supporting each other. And I hope that we can do that soon. But back in 1966, when I was 11 years old, I guess I was a motivated young man, and I became a member of the Sierra Club at that time. Back in those days, you couldn't just write out a check or a money order and send it in and become a member. You either had to be sponsored by a current member, or, since I didn't know one, I wrote to the president. That was the other methodology. So I wrote to the president, and I became a member of the Sierra Club when I was 11. Because as an 11-year-old, I felt that this is something that it was important to me. They were doing good work. I wanted to, at that time, support my allies, and that was, what, 45 years ago. So you get this little seed that's planted, and you see that there's injustice and there's unfairness, and you look around and your choices are either I can act on this or I can walk away. And I don't think anybody in this room is really capable of walking away. When we've got a problem, we owe it to our families, we owe it to our community, we owe it to our country, and we owe it to the planet Earth that we've got to fight for what's right. We know deep down it's right. We know that we can't carry on the short-term, profit-driven decision-making that is disastrous for the long-term needs of society. So I'm hoping that with a conference like this, that if we share our story about trouble that we have in agriculture, that it's something that's going to resonate with you folks that are in the environmental community, because I think this is just a different side of the same fight. It's a fight for what is right, and it's something that is necessary for the earth to be healed and for us to go forward and have a livable earth for the generations that follow, the way our ancestors have handed down to us. So thank you very much. And I'm happy